Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service, here today to present the third increment of horary astrology. So as we remember, it's an ancient technique. A lot of these videos are about really reviewing the old classics. I decided to stay with that. And then if I do another video, I'll elaborate on how to make it more modern. But today we're going to concentrate on the newer planets and how they affect the overall view of what we're getting. And also, as newer astrologers, maybe looking at ways that we could use what we know to expand our interpretations of these events that we're looking at. So before I move on into the information, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to all my subscribers, but mostly thank you for watching this video, because these are the videos of the hardcore astrology students or astrologers. Some people are already practicing astrology, but like myself, want to know more about other subject matters related to astrology. So thank you for helping this venue, this channel to grow. And thank you for allowing me into your life, as always. So as I go into this material, one of the things I did want to talk about at the very end is I want to spend some time on the kind of questions that you're going to have to, I want to say, center down into, to ask. These cannot, when you decide to play with horary, you can't, we don't want to, how do I put this, make it a broad statement, because you won't get an answer. And I think that that's one of the things that both of the authors were trying to point out. So let's look at it. So I'm back, and not in the same location that I was. Unfortunately, I live in the city, and we're in constant states of working on the road where I live. So unfortunately, I've been booted. But we're looking at what I have here in front of us, and we're looking at our newer planets. And it starts here with Uranus. And when you're working with horary, one of the clues here is that it's still preferred, I'm going to actually use my pen today, it still prefers that we use the old system. Okay, so this is really key here. Okay, so the old rulers. Oops, wow. Okay, let's see if there is oh yeah, let's do that. Okay, well, first, let me get rid of that, and then let me go into that. And this will make more sense. Okay, so basically looking at things like this, it is still preferred to use the old rulers. So we're going to go through the new rulers, but realize that when a question is asked, and we'll get to that at the end, you want to use the old ruler system, which is that, in this case, Aquarius is another Saturn. I call it the nighttime Saturn. So we have here Uranus, and Uranus comes with the principle of reorganization. And the interesting thing is, the key on the word reorganization, we actually have asteroids for this in astrology, where you have to destroy something in order to reorganize it. There has to be a destruction, if you will. It also talks about how, and this is very true with Uranus, that it's about reformation. It's about equity a lot of times. It's about people either want their freedom, or it has something to do with your freedoms, but in a more humanitarian way. So that social or political, and the energy itself will use violence. So it is not, how do I say, it's not without its own volatility. Revolutions, particularly where they overthrow the government, are noted for Aquarius. Now, what's really interesting is we've just embarked in a new age, and Aquarius or Uranus is now ruling Saturn and Jupiter. And when it first came together is when it became very apparent that there was an element in the country that wants to overthrow the government. Okay, that there are people in our population that want a revolt and they want to take over the government. So I just thought that was really interesting that on the 21st of December was the first time that they had aligned, but January 6th, literally, 2 weeks later, they were in insurgence. So that is really putting a real nutshell on that Uranus and Aquarius energy. So and it's also a square to Uranus. So before I go on, when Jupiter and Saturn are doing their conjunction thing in Aquarius, Uranus is at the same time, Uranus, which rules Aquarius, is actually squaring it in Taurus. So I think that's, a lot of our anxiety can be based in that. So it also rules things like the circulation of the blood, the circulation of the news. Is it no surprise that, I can't go down. It's no surprise that the news is also big right now. That there is this element of the media's, what did the last guy say? Fake media. Of course, that was just, here we go again. But it really did kind of put a pointer on the fact that maybe we should be paying more attention to the circulation of the news. So it's really viable, and it's really interesting that we're going through this now while I'm teaching this, because it does remind us of certain things that are applicable in astrology regardless, especially in the mundane level. The circulation of the wind, well, oh geez, do we need to say more about the weather recently? Okay, just for future reference, the date is March 30th, 2021, and we just got done having a series of storms that tore up the Southwest like nobody's business, okay? And it's been going on for a couple of years. So there's a circulation of the wind, there's our hurricanes, our tornadoes. So we're really getting to learn about this Uranus energy in a real in-your-face way, which is why I waited to do this as a separate video, because it was just so spot on. And we're in a position right now where you and I and everybody around us is being able to experience these energies firsthand. Utopian ideologies, well, that's what they call the liberals, reformers. So it's really interesting how we have revolution on both sides. Corporations and all associations of equals, which means unions. And right now, Amazon is fighting to keep the union out. Okay? It's about Congress. It's about the common man. It's about the people. The people. Not so much the government, right? So then, but it's the associations, the eccentric people, particularly if old and crotchety. I'm sure I fit in there. Our space and its exploration. What's the other big news? We're sending 4 civilians out into space. Astronomy and astrology. One can only hope. I'm an astrologer, and I would love to see more interest there. The Industrial Revolution. It coincides with the discovery of Uranus in 1781. That's when this kind of started. It really snowballed because it's, as with anything, Industrial Revolution was also about making assembling lines of things. And from there, we got into more technologies or motors and etc. So then things exponentially get better. Electricity and electric energy, I think, also was discovered around that time. Radium and radioactivity, well, that would be Madame Curie. So here we go. X-rays and radium treatment. Earthquakes, explosion. Homosexuality because I would imagine, and again, I'm not saying that I would know this for certain, but because it takes, to be able to live, especially in certain time periods, you have to be somewhat revolutionary, to be pioneering, to be able to express yourself in a way that is not considered traditional. So it could be, but also just that whole freedom thing, homosexuality, castration, because it comes out of that myth of how Uranus, the sky god, which is Uranus, was castrated by his own son, Kronos, and then I put the new astrology spelling for Kronos in there. So Kronos, well, that's how we ended up getting castrated. I'm not saying Kronos didn't deserve it. There's a lot of debate on that stuff, but that's why it's associated with that. I'm going to come out of this, and let's see what we have down further down the sheet here. Okay, I'm going to start right with the nervous system. Okay, so we have the nervous system, heavy artillery, like atomic and nuclear bombs. Okay, so we're talking like next level stuff. Aircrafts and spacecrafts, well, obviously, space, astronomy, the stars. So, you know, and this is what I'm getting into, things that revolutionize our life. So those new technologies, we have them all the time. We're going to have them a lot now that we're in this particular age. So here you can see that they threw in a couple of things here about Aquarius, which I can tell you very true. Some things that we've laughed about as astrologers. Uranus or Aquarius energy loves humanity. They are the humanitarians in the zodiac, but they truly dislike people. So it's more like a sweeping type of an effect, or an unexpected, larger kind of concept when you're talking about the energy of Uranus or Aquarius. And this is probably one of my most favorite lines right here. And this, I can tell you, is been true of not just Aquarian suns, but Aquarian moons, or people that have a lot of energy in Aquarius. They are more loners usually. So they're not big socialites, unless they had some other unusual things going on in their chart. It is not a social energy, which is so ironic, because it is a promoter of big changes within communities or governments even, okay? And I could name you cases and examples till doomsday of this whole concept. Uranus rules metals like aluminum and uranium. Well, we go back to the uranium, which we talked about earlier. The color of Uranus is sky blue. Uranus is on the rising or the ascendant of the Declaration of Independence, and it makes it a ruling planet of the United States. And I think we only have to look at I already brought it up, that the United States has two revolutions going on right now. And one of them is to create a more equitable system, if you will, to kind of level the playing field. And the other one is trying to overthrow the government. They want an end to the whole thing. So very Uranus, both of them, and Uranus being on the ascendant of the Declaration of Independence is quite an interesting concept when we think about, here we are, a couple hundred years later, and oh geez, look what we're dealing with. So very interesting. And so with that said, I'm going to cross that up. I'm going to move on into Neptune. One of the things that I haven't done with any of these, and I don't know that I would have to with you guys, but is to give you an idea of each of the glyphs. And it's interesting because, I've been an astrologer for a long time. And, in the very beginning, and this was true even when I got into asteroids, you have to relearn, all the asteroids. So the more asteroids I was learning, but then after I think we hit, I don't even know how many, 60, 70, I don't even know. Now we just go by the actual, we use glyphs where there are glyphs, but where there are not, we're not putting them in right now. So it's just, we've just gone through this whole astronomical rebirth ourselves within our astrology communities because of the trans-Neptunians, which were the early part of the 1900, mid to early part, and then it came to the United States in the latter parts from the 70s on. So you had the trans-Neptunians, which are rather new. And then as you got into like the 90s, people throughout the 80s were experimenting with this idea that then was presented big time in the 90s, which were the asteroids. Now that we're using asteroids, we're using them for like medical astrology. We're using, in other words, it's just expanded who we are as artists. As well as artists, as astrologers. It is an art. It's a science, but it's also an art, in my opinion. So I think it's the art of, but it's also based in science. So then we're moving on and we're going to look at Neptune, okay? So Neptune, or the fork of Trident, is about the principle of diffusion. And just think about what you know about astrology, just on the most basic level. Yeah, that's all I have to say. What a great word she chose there. So again, I'm going to give Barbara Waters her credit for this. I do use the cover of her book to show that that's what I'm discussing here. And just also because I find the fact that she's a classic, and I do own books by like Carter, which was I think written in 1910, and I have the A to Z Encyclopedia of Astrology, which I think was also written around 1910. I, as a dancer even though it was modern, prefer, you got to look at your classics, okay, because your classics laid the groundwork. And that's why I think this looking at what we're doing and what I've been doing in these videos is so very important, because we don't, in the modernization of astrology, we don't want to lose touch with the thing that got us there in the first place. Okay, so enough of that. Let's move to our Neptune. So Neptune, we already said, it's this diffusion. It's the process by which given amount of energy, when released into the environment, becomes diluted, diffused throughout an area, and eventually dissolves into the environment. Oh boy, let's go back to our situation, because we also have a Neptune in Pisces, very strong here. When somebody makes a false statement, which was happening terribly after the election, it was then absorbed by the social medias and then diluted and filtered into, and unfortunately, that dissolved into an environment that upset or caused an uproar. So I want to show Neptune, and then we can show the other side of Neptune, which is the compassion and the diffusion of how we need to take care of our brothers and sisters, how we need to be there for each other. That happened because of COVID. So you have two different things occurring, here we go again, at the same time, and maybe from two different angles. So really good example. Again, I think the woman's a good writer. I think she was actually someone recommended to me by Martha Lang Westcott, who is my teacher, who is still very much with us. It also talks about how Neptune is associated with communism, because of that whole idea of the individual merges into one machine. And I really want to state how important that is in light of the things that we're going through now politically, okay? Because ultimately, one of the features of the machine is that it can tell you anything. And here we go with the lies and propagating information. So one of the greatest features we have as democracies is a free press, okay? Because once you lose that press, you're done. And communism is a form of fascism at times. I mean, I think any of these systems could work if we were a more evolved people. We're not. And as long as you have people who are going to take advantage and rise to the top and then abuse and take advantage of those below them, it'll never work. But that's what communism is based in. Junk is considered a part of Neptune because whatever was there, whatever it is that is being referred to as junk, has now lost its original integrity through the wear and tear. Okay? But some people really like junk. So one man's junk is another man's treasure, and that couldn't be more true, nor could it also be any more Neptune. Okay? Christianity, self-sacrifice. Well, then you look at Christianity and you think, ooh, yeah, self-sacrifice, Christianity, the whole concept of martyrdom. Very Neptune. You know, the whole rise of Christianity occurred during a very Piscean age. And I think that that's something that is, you know, if you ever are able to look at some of the Hellenistic astrologers, I think they would talk about that. I find that whole subject fascinating, but I do like Hellenistic astrology myself. Slaves and slavery, yeah, because you don't have a say when you're a slave, okay, and slavery. Impotence, whether physical, mental, or spiritual, to ever be put into a situation where you cannot be the fullest of whatever you are, is Neptune. Dreams, because Neptune is intangible. Imagines, like imaginations, but migraines is what they're saying. Images or migraine, mirages. Oh, images and mirages. Where am I looking? I know it's because I'm jumping down. Okay, images and mirages, hallucinations, and this includes spiritualists, psychics, and readers. And the interesting thing is that sometimes people will throw astrologers in there. No, they don't belong in there. And the irony of ironies are, though, I'm somebody who actually reads the cards. The way and the manner and how I learned how to read the cards, I might fall into that category, but I might not. Okay, and if it would be, I'd only be in what they call the reader category. Okay, just to really make a differentiation there. Okay. Photographs, obviously, moving pictures, television pictures, public images, and propaganda, and many types of fraud, lies, delusion, disillusion, and that includes the self-deception kind. See what I mean about the press? Okay? So it's something to really consider when you start looking at some of these things and you understand that initially this is all they had, okay? Were these basic things. That's all they had to work with. So, now, as I'm going to move down, I'm going to come into a tool here I want to highlight. So, a couple of things here that I thought are really, really important. Wow, you know, could it get any better? But this is where the real stuff is. All of this. Okay, this is when Neptune's in a strong place right now, and we are alerted, if you will, to the fact that this is going on. People who are more aware. And I'm going to, hats off, guys. I think you're in that category. So let's move on. Okay, so poisons, drugs, and alcohol. Well, let me tell you something. Yeah, all that stuff. Why? Because it makes you not yourself, or some people would say maybe it brings out your true self. But remember, the filters are gone. And it's all there. Welfare and charity and the institutions and groups that dispense it all come under the heading of Neptune, and that's where I come in with the compassion and that, you know, the need to help orphans and orphanages. Illegitimate children, ironically, come under this. And I think, you know, when you think about illegitimate children, you think about the fact that there's so many, even if they know who both their parents are, The fact that mom and dad weren't committed is where that goes. I don't think it's whether or not it affects the kid. I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with the fact that, remember, it's an intangible. Okay? Skeletons in the closet. Ooh, yeah. Well, this is where that gets a little funky with the illegitimate children. And I also want to do something here, talk about something. When we look at groups of people, we look at them in generations. And one of the things that is very important to consider in all of this is how different one generation is to another. And I'll give you an example. The generation they call the greatest generation, I guess because of World War II, I have a lot of question about that. But they are also how do I put this, the most vulnerable population, in that they are, as a generation, they're sometimes the least aware. And by the way, that didn't just start because they got old. I remember in the 1980s, early on, I was always very politically astute. Okay, I just like politics, never wanted to get into it, but I kind of always like to know what's going on. And I was so angry at some points in the 80s because it didn't feel like people were paying attention. I don't feel like that anymore. It's a different generation. So when you look at especially when you get to skeletons in the closet and things like that, I don't feel like, I feel like there's more of that in the generation, and Barbara was even of that generation or prior to it, where you just didn't talk about things. Well, the age of Aquarius brings in transparency, so I'm wondering how that's going to affect this. I'm not saying that people still won't have skeletons in the closet, okay? The bankruptcy, embezzlement, again, all of this stuff comes under delusion. You got deluded, you got deceived, deception. So a lot of these words are like, and she did write this book with class, and I think she was shooting for give me all the words, and then she would write them down, and she would make note of what was there and then put it in the book. So anything that they really broke it down, okay, all of that is Neptune, but it is all related to an intangible deception. So then you have the ocean, and then the ships, the navies, the sailors, okay, all of that applies. But here's the big thing. Let me pull this up here before I do that. Okay, here's the big thing, all right, right here. Let me pull my highlighter on. Okay, you're looking at Poseidon too, which is a higher octave of Neptune. Okay, I know I didn't get it. I think I spoke about that stuff. If you wanted to look at Poseidon or the Trans-Neptunians, I have done articles at least on them on the website. I don't know if I did videos on them all, and that's like one of those things I should go back and check, because my sites existed a long time. The YouTube channel is rather new by comparison. But anyway, Poseidon is the ocean, and Neptune is a lesser degree Poseidon. The trident of Poseidon, you know, that's what we use. So anyway, it's also things like hospitals. But here we go with chemistry and chemists, because, and by the way, alcohol fits this because you're mixing things together to create other things. Okay? Something out of nothing. Gas and oil, fish, fishermen and fishmongers. Yeah, anything of the fish, the Pisces. Yeah, absolutely. Because Neptune is the new ruler of, just like the new ruler of Uranus is Aquarius, the new ruler of Pisces is Neptune. These are the newer planets, so I'm just describing, they're actually not looked at in the same way unless, and we'll get to that in a second, a person's asking a specific question. So then we have like the poets, the painters, the ballet, the dancers, and I'm a big fan of ballet, so and having taught ballet and all of that, It is, to me, just as it's such a refined art, just like sculpting and painting and music, which, of course, goes hand in hand with dance. Although you can dance without music, But anyway, but just all of that. And I think of the inspiration it takes to be a dancer, an artist, or a musician. Okay? A poet, all of those things take a degree of inspiration. The endocrine glands and the chemistry of the body, which makes sense. Salt, I don't know, you lost me on the salt, but here's a thing where I'm still considered a modern astrologer. And so, I really got into my astrology studies, I'm going to say by the 70s, hardcore. But let's be honest, by 70s, they were already I was already really attracted to, all the new stuff, and continued to go that modern way. So pearls, coral, and other wealth of the sea. Now, they make sense to me more than salt, but then salt is also of the sea. It's the rock of the sea. Neptune's colors obviously make sense. And the hues, the iridescence. Yeah, okay. In mundane astrology, and this is like a whole list of things. So let me get off of this, right? This thing. And so we can go through this, because you're just going to see a little bit of review here. Now, mundane astrology is when you're looking at current affairs, current events. It studies the what's going on that moment. It's not about asking a question. That's one of the huge differences. But Neptune rules the Navy, the nation's hospitals and welfare programs, counter-espionage, the prison system. Okay, so look at how many of these systems are. Here's persecution. I'm going to get a highlighter on this. That's what I wanted. How many of these are either secret, charitable, or deception? In other words, you're repeating the same things over and over again. Persecution of minorities, we're there, okay? We're looking at that because this rules serfs and slaves. So when people are, what's the word for put down? When they are when they're the people that it's the persecution of people who are just, maybe not live as well or different. I always want to say the vulnerable population, but I know there's a better word than that. But it's, it's really bad. And then the social problems that concerns. Again, you're dealing with drugs. Prostitution is there because of delusion. And although here again, prostitution is around because of drugs. So, although it's the oldest profession there is. And I think it's because at one time women didn't have a way to make a living. Here we go. And more presently, it's because of the drug world, which has gotten so big. So it's also things, and here we go again with the persecution, concentration camps, prisoner of war camps, okay, but it also relates to pollution of the waterways. I love that she put this in the 70s. That's when we first realized we had a huge problem. It's taken us this long to come up with better policies, although the state I live in did apply some really good policies back in the 70s. Neptune is, it rules the assassination of public figures. I thought that was interesting, considering that as, an American, I've even in my lifetime have seen this. So Neptune rules that because, I don't know why, but a lot of deception, delusion, smoke and mirrors. I could just, wow. I think we could just go on. Corruption, a lot of factors play into that. Neptune rules Israel as it has Neptune right on its ascendant, making it the ruling planet of Israel. Isn't that interesting that Israel is a land that is made up of initially slaves? I don't think there are any coincidences in life. Israel, those people were slaves of Egypt initially. So it's a country, and also then they were, I know that they came about much later, but Israel itself is also, you know, people that were persecuted on Europe and all of that before they finally have their own place. So it's very interesting, and I don't think there's a coincidence there. The other thing that's interesting here is Netanyahu continuously is in trouble for corruption, and I believe there are some big issues there. So that are also related to the way their government is. So, but they can also be the most compassionate. Here we go. Remember, there are always two sides to all energies. Just like we have two different kinds of revolutions, there are two sides to the Neptune story as well. So I just think that's really, really interesting. So here we are with Pluto. And Pluto's principle is metamorphosis. Apparently I didn't spell it right. But anyway, metamorphosis is what Pluto's about. Or as we like to say, it's about, it's transformation, not just change, but transformation. That's the word I use to describe Pluto the most. The principle of Pluto is, like I say, metamorphosis, but it's also about the seed. And I like that they go spermatosa and ova, which are the two things that come together to create life, or human life. But it's like the two, when it's most Pluto is when it's in that state of not connected, when it's just unknown what it is. It's the hidden wealth and minds. Here we go again with Pluto is the hidden. So the word hidden, okay? Any phase of growth or cycles which are hidden from view. Here we go. Incubations, when you have that, I can't even say this word, but I know what it is. It's the cocooning of, you know, when it goes from being this to that, like caterpillars to butterflies type thing. It's the concepts described in the Phoenix. And you know the whole concept is the Phoenix rising. It talks about karma in the ideas of death and regeneration. And here we go with transformation. So karma, as you know, is the cause and effect. And I really want to keep it at the words of cause and effect, because, so we don't want to think about this, okay, karma. It's about the lessons of karma, but it's really about the cause and effect of karma. When something happens, it triggers a cycle of events. Death and regeneration are then under the same Pluto. They're Pluto. Hecate is an asteroid that also comes to mind here, but it's Pluto. Snakes because they shed their skin. Here we go with that cocooning and metamorphosis thing. Snakes, armored reptiles like crocodiles, iguanas, armadillos, lizards, turtles. They all have, they're armored. They all have a coating. That's what I want to say. Okay, Pluto. Let me get off of that. Let's go down. Okay. Pluto's really interesting, actually. Probably one of the ones that she did. A lot of people have done a lot of work on Pluto. Vultures, birds that eat carnage. Yeah, very Pluto. Very Pluto. Corpses, buried treasures, sex and the sex organs. We actually already mentioned that a little bit. Excrement, because it's what's left. All decaying matter, decomposition, fertilizes the earth. Remember that, okay? So it's all about birth and death, okay? Social insects. Why? Because they can transform things together. Termites, wasps, ants, vermin, particularly those that carry disease and plagues. Rats come under this, okay? Bats, we just went through a whole virus because of that, okay? And when did that virus kind of really hit us? Sure, when Pluto was doing a lineup with Saturn and Jupiter and making a grand connection. So again, you want to think about how disease, okay, and what does it represent? And how these animals, they don't seem to be affected, but it's almost like it's something that we have no control over, pulls the rug out from under us. Those things that survive in sewers, like cockroaches, but again, rats. Venereal disease is considered Pluto, okay? Because it changes everything. You know, when Pluto gets involved, it changes everything. The same thing here with political underground. Boy, that's huge. And organized crime, okay? Secret police, espionage, plots, things that are, here we go again, hidden. Because those are things that can pull the rug out from under everybody. Because they're not obvious, which means they're very difficult to control. Pluto's very difficult to control. So we have the cartel and secret agencies, and they're to go with that, the anarchy and anarchists, the FBI and the CIA. But you see how all those things kind of fit together. Detectives, because they're ferreting out, and Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio, the new ruler of Scorpio. Okay, in the old system, Scorpio is a Mars. So you have to really consider these things when you're looking at horary if you want to follow the old and tried and true, the system that really worked for them. And they really do, you know, kind of want you to know this information. My feeling is we're modern, living in a modern time, so I'm not sure yet that I agree with that. I've been playing with the horary, but I want to keep playing with it in order to make a better analysis, a better study of how the new rulers work. Because honestly, in Karen Hondag, or I cannot say her name, Zontag. Anyway, she, in her book, does, I think, more experimental with the newer rulers. Okay? Think of two that, you know, it's always the two sides of it. You have the rape and the rapist, of course, because they're the ones, you know, doing the action. The atomic bomb energies, okay, those are totalitarians. You know, anytime there's a bully on board, that's usually how it is, tyrants and dictators, because plutocrats are the great wealth. Yeah, because they're the ones that can, and often do, and have, at least for the last 200 years, when we're in a material age, been able to call the shots. I'm not saying that will ever change. I'm just saying that's going to be a little different than another age. But you can see how this works, okay? The extraction of money under threat or violence. Oh, please. Terrorists. Again, that's how I think of this stuff. How much is a plutocrat different than a person who's a terrorist? Well, usually it's intention. Okay? But it does make one, you know, here we go again. Race and genetic differences. They're not definitely saying, hey, this race is definitely assigned to that, or that race is definitely, no. The fact that they're in individual tribal concepts is Pluto. Okay? And she goes into a story about that. So let's come back, and I want to do our final section here. Okay, so I push the button and it goes into, here we go. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too bad for you guys. I'm still learning programs. I'm an older person learning technology. And though I was an astrologer and we've been working with software for a really, really long time, I might be better than most people my age, but I'm still my age. Okay, so what I want to do, or what I would like to, let me get rid of that, is I'd like to go through just a couple of things, rules to bear in mind when questioning to try and play with a horary chart. Horary chart works best if it's a yes or no. I know that sounds really weird because you also can read things about the yes or no in there, but that is one of the most basic concepts about the questioning. You cannot ever ask about a question that is either about somebody else, which is unethical, or that the answer to the question relies on someone else. Okay, so that kind of throws a lot out. Now, by the same token, yes, you can ask, will I get the job? You know, I think it might be, will I get the guy or girl? Or, you know, I think you could still ask those questions, even though they are still dependent on the other party. You would just look in the appropriate houses. So, example, you're looking whether or not it's going to be a partnership, look to the 7th house. You're looking for a job, look to the 6th house. So use the house, and then what rules the house, and then look where that planet is and how it's being aspected, and see what you get from it. But when it comes to the questioning concepts here, it's really, really important that you stick with as basic a question as you can. That you don't tag anything onto it like, you know, are we going to get this new house? And are we going to get the loan? You know, one question. That's all they're ever good for. So what I could get from my research, what I could glean, is that you have to keep think about this. When horary was its thing, people were a little bit simpler. Their lives were a lot simpler. And I think that questioning would have automatically been simpler. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I think questioning is something that if you were here and we were acting interactively, I think that I would have you all ask me questions, and I would probably say, I don't think that would work. I think that would work. I think that what I want to say to you is that you want to keep the questions impersonal, very, very simple. Yes or no's tend to work the best. And go from there. Don't arachne them. Don't cause more intrigue or apply more to the question. Okay? I would almost say that you should write the question down and keep going over it before you actually go to the computer to get it answered. Because I kind of think that the ones that don't work are the ones that you might do on the spur of the moment. I think it works much better if it's a very well thought out question, because the question is so important to whether or not the system will work. You know, you could be the best astrologer in the world, but you know, you're going to come up with some crap in the 7th house, or Saturn, something's going to be in the 7th house. It's going to tell you that chart ain't any good. And, you know, a lot of that is because maybe the question in the first place. So realize the importance of the question, but the question must be very, very simple. You can't say, oh, am I going to go to college, and then what college? No. Have a college in mind and then ask. And it will tell you. And it might give you some information about, oh, well, maybe it tells you didn't go to that college, but then it shows the opportunity that you might feel is better. So you got to stay with the straight, though. You got to stay with a very straight question. Okay? So I'm going to leave you with that. I want to thank you all for watching this video. And I really, really mean that, because that means that if you're watching this video, which is the 3rd increment, you're somebody who's really interested in astrology, and you are the people I want to cultivate the most. Okay? I want other people to be interested in astrology, don't get me wrong. But I am an astrology teacher, and I have been in the past, and I enjoy doing it. So thank you for allowing me to do it. With that said, as always, I want to wish you only happy readings.